you seem to have a knack to be able to drag yourself out of the philosophy and get yourself into action. That person that goes, I love when I hear these aphorisms and things, and maybe it goes on the whiteboard that's on the front of my fridge for a couple of months. How does that person get from mental masturbation around it to action, that this impacts my life in a tangible way that actually makes a difference to me? Any of the things that we go through today.
All right. Two things. One is knowing the input-output equation. The second is knowing what your fuel is going to be. So if you can't define the inputs and outputs that are going to get you what you want, then there's no way to start, right? Because you don't know what you're supposed to do. So you have to define it down to like the most basic first action. So it's like, if I want to start creating content, then it means I have to post something. If it means I have to start doing I always think in terms of business because that's what I'm in. But like, I'm either doing a cold reach out, I'm doing a cold call, cold email, cold DM, whatever that is. I have to make a piece of content. I have to post it. I have to make a podcast. I have to make a YouTube video. I have to make a short, whatever that is, make a blog post, like whatever that core initial action is.
Go to the gym, input. Lift the weight, put the shoes on, get in the car.
Whatever the input is, you have to define what the input is that's going to get you the output you want. Now, once you know what that input output is, the next one is, why aren't you doing it? Right? And so I think a lot of people are looking for something that is very hard to find. And then they attribute their lack of success or lack of action because they don't have passion or motivation, right? And I was the same way. And so the short story around this was that I watched all the TED Talks in college. Like that was like what I was like, I'm not watching YouTube, I'm watching TED Talks. And I was like, and then I realized, and then I heard the term mental masturbation and I was like, oh, that's definitely what I'm doing. I was like, my life hasn't changed at all. And then I got my job, so out of college, and I would read all the self-help books. I read like every night. That's all I did. I just read all these self-help books. And I found one of them that said, there are people who are wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And I remember hearing that word wantrepreneur, and I was like, it made me feel sad. I was like, I don't want to be fucking wantrepreneur. I was like, I'm not some bitch. Like, you know, but I was like, but what if they're right? I am a wantrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur. I want to be one, and I'm not. And from that point, it took me 6 months to quit my job to actually decide to do the entrepreneurial thing. And there are many things that contributed to me being able to leave. And I think a lot of it's not like people are looking for one thing. It might be a big bag of whys, a lot of them, right? That add up together to be above your action threshold. And I think in the early days, people are looking for the big carrot. They want the big vision. They want the big passion, but they don't have it. But I'll give you the first rule of entrepreneurship that I have learned, which is use what you have. And a lot more people have pain. A lot more people have anger. A lot more people have shame. And if you can use that as your gas in the beginning, you'll eventually get to a point where you can get out of that loop and then find something that you are really passionate about. But if you can't tie your shoes, you can't lift the weight, you can't send the DM, then you have to start with whatever you have. And so for me, it was hatred of my current existence. I hated being an entrepreneur. I hated being a wannabe. I hated being one of those people who like talked about all the things they were going to do and didn't do anything. I hated living the life that my dad wanted me to live. I was his bitch. That's what it was. I was his bitch. I was living his dreams out, not mine. And that was, led to that other tweet, which was, sometimes your parents' dreams have to die in order for yours to live. And for me, I realized that the idea that my father had of me as his son, that image had to die in order for the image of myself that I wanted to be to live. Because I kept trying to quit my job and go be an entrepreneur. And every time I'd have the conversation, be like, come over, we'll talk about it, we'll have dinner, and he'd always talk me off the ledge. It was always over and over again.
Good salesman.
Yeah. Or great authoritarian. You don't need to persuade when you have compliance. And so everybody has that person, or it might actually be somebody who's talking you off the ledge, or it might just be a voice in your head. It doesn't really matter, because that voice in person that only happened once or twice probably keeps talking to you when you're at home. But the big thing for me when I decided to make the jump, and mind you, I was such a bitch about it that I had to drive across the country before I called him to tell him that I'd left.
Yeah, I remember that.
I didn't want to confront him, which he then flew off the handle about. I just knew, and this is the Tony Robbins quote, but it's just when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And I think pain moves people far, far more effectively than pleasure does. Like the easy way to prove it is like point a gun at someone's head and you have absolute compliance and they will do what they need to do, right? Automatically, just like that. Like death is the great motivator and the gun just reminds you. And so I think that if you can create the figurative gun to your head of the pain that you're experiencing, and then I'm a big fan of future casting out, negative scenarios. So people talk about like positive visualization. I prefer negative visualization, which is what if I keep doing what I'm currently doing for the next 10 years? What will my life look like then? That usually takes my current pain and then just magnifies it. And then that allows me to get my action threshold high enough that it goes over the edge so that I can take that first move. And so if you know what the inputs, outputs are of what you need to do, the guy who has the little quote on his wall, and you figure out whatever fuel you've got, not the one you wish you had, but the one you've got, and you use that to do the first input, you've crossed the line. You're in the game.